Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is one of my own. Yes, it is episode 27 of my ongoing weekly series, Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000 word short story every week, like I said, with no outline based on a piece of artwork. Today's a bit of a zany one. I will let you know right off the bat. It's somewhat of a dark comedy. So if you are into that kind of thing, I think you're gonna have some fun with this. At least I had a lot of fun writing it. And really with the image you're about to see, I don't know that it could have gone any other way. So what did I listen to this time? What was the music, the soundtrack of this story? Well, it is the latest EP from Martin Gore called The Third Chimpanzee. And I'd listened to this one before. My friend Mike, he's a big Depeche Mode fan. Martin Gore is really the primary songwriter of Depeche Mode, and this is a little instrumental solo EP he came out with, and it has a lot of the just kind of quirkiness to it that I felt would really align itself with the artwork, and so that's what I listened to. But anyway, it was kind of a fun departure from more of the cinematic stuff that I listen to most of the time, or even ambient, I guess. This is not ambient at all. All right, let's check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is by Ski Graphic Studio, a freelance artist out of Rome, Italy, and it is titled, Can I Ride With You? I'm sure you can realize why I chose this one. It is completely bonkers, and I don't use that word lightly. Well, what do we have here? We have a rubber duck in a shoe in a keep clear spot in a parking garage. And next to that is a beat up car. It looks like the windows are knocked out or something, and there's a lot of damage to the roof of the car, the windshield, and really just the whole thing. And all of this is taking place in a wet, dirty, dank parking garage. So I love the contrast here. I mean, you have what would otherwise be a very normal image, a beat up car and a parking garage, but what sells it is the rubber duck in the shoe. And I knew I just had to find out what the story here was. I have a feeling it's going to get dark, but would you expect anything less from me? So Ski Graphic Studio, thank you for creating such a unique and hilarious piece of artwork. Let's see what I came up with. Squeak. You hear that? Dave said around a mouthful of Cool Ranch Doritos. Huh? Greg said, meandering through the parking garage, punching the radio tuner buttons to fight the static. Squeak. That, Dave crunched. I'm trying to fix it, all right? This fucking car. Turn off the damn radio, Dave said and tossed the empty bag on the dash. Hey, man, Greg said. Not cool. The car swerved, grazing a tiled column. What the fuck? Dave said. I could have choked you, asshole. He rubbed his throat while swallowing down the last crumbs sitting on the back of his tongue. Light was out, Greg said. It was, and the other lights only made the lack of light here darker. The column looked like a dark passage to an elevator, and the parking garage beneath Dave's apartment complex had plenty of those. Fuck, he needed to move. Squeak. You hear that? Greg asked. Dave sighed, fuck, and did some breath work to calm his heart. It beat his rib cage like a punching bag. Seriously, though, Greg said. You leave your dog's toy in here again? You know I hate that fucking thing. It stinks up the car. Squeak. No, Dave said. And yes, I heard it. Rats, then. You live in such a shithole. Dave turned to Greg ever so slowly, making sure to not make eye contact, until he had made it through another calming mantra and had another deep inhale and exhale, diaphragm centered. Just park, Dave said, and he scanned the car interior that looked like it had been attacked by 1,000 cats, then pissed on by 1,000 more. Stained and beyond stinky. Although Dave had gotten used to breathing through his mouth when he rode with Greg, Eating the Doritos had been a mistake. Choking on chips or the smell of cat piss weren't good options. Never mind. Dave grabbed his backpack from the floor, took the bag of Doritos because he wouldn't give Greg the ironic satisfaction, and slipped his hand out the window hole because there was no window to open it, because you couldn't open it from the inside. He stopped when he saw Greg's face, a strip of light crossing his eyes like those shots in horror movies. They were wide as hell. "You all right?" Dave said. "Weak." How many drinks did I have?" Greg said. Dave's blood chilled, his skin riddled with goose flesh. He wasn't driving, so he was okay, but Greg was always his ride, and if he got a DUI, Dave would be stuck walking again, or worse, taking the bus. He slapped his face to jog his memory for any fool the breathalyzer quick fixes, but he was a little buzzed too, so came up empty. "Just relax," Dave said. "Let me talk, okay?" Greg nodded, bangs flinging up and down. Dave cupped his hand over his mouth to smell his own breath, a trick that never seemed to work, then turned to the window hole. "Officer?" In the parking spot next to them, well, the keep clear spot that had earned him plenty of tickets back when he had a car, was a shoe. A big fucking shoe. Laced the way shoes are for store displays. And inside was a big fucking duck. Not a real one, a rubber one, sitting right where a giant fucking foot would if it were wearing the shoe. "Squeak!" Dave flinched. Greg screamed. Dave laughed, neck ready to burst, abs cramping, undigested Doritos ready to erupt. He rolled in the car seat, stomping his feet, then fell back, legs still going, and lost a shoe through the window hole. "You fucking..." Dave couldn't finish, consumed by laughter. After he was finally exhausted and felt like he'd sprinted a mile, he sat up, fumbled with his phone to get a shot of Greg's face, which was still plastered with fear. The selfie camera blipped on, and next to his silhouetted blur of a head was that rubber duck, head turned to look right at him. For some reason, all that went through Dave's head at that moment was the fact that those rubber ducks didn't have articulated necks. They couldn't turn at all. In the span of that thought, the shoe launched into the air, shattering the column between it and the car in a spray of tile and concrete. Dave found himself on the floor of the car, tangled, chin pinned to his chest, throat pinched closed. Through the window opening, he saw the bottom of that shoe, and it was anything but clean. Smeared with gore, particulate hit him in the face as it flew over the top of the car to land on the roof. Squeak, crunch. Every time it came down for another hit, the squeak intensified, harmonizing with Greg's screeches as he pawed at the door to get out. His fingers remembered the technique, and he slipped onto the wet concrete. His hands and feet unable to get him up, the best he could do was roll onto his back, and his eyes held the same expression when they had been in a rectangle of light. Squeak, splat, crunch. Flesh and blood and bone were stomped by that big duck and its shoe until Dave was as flat as the rest of the scum skinning the parking garage floor. Dave clambered to the driver's seat and fell back to the floor when the duck took another stomp on the car's roof. Hand to the gas pedal, the car revved. He fumbled blind with a gear shift. The car rolled back while he tried to get in a seated position. Hands finally on the wheel, the toe of the big shoe rushed toward the windshield as the car hit the very thing Greg had nearly crashed into. Strange how pretty it looked. The windshield shattering with a perfect symmetry, punctuated by a squeak that almost sounded like it was sorry for what it was about to do. And all Dave could do was laugh. Squeak. What else could I have started with? Really, look at this thing. So, this story was weird. I part of me regrets going into the dark territory because I feel like that's too expected for me, and I was completely ignoring the title "Can I Ride with You?" But I guess you could construe it in a way that fits with the story I came up with. So what did I need to do? I needed to get these two characters together in this car because we don't see anybody in the image right now, but the taillights look like they're on in this car, so I'm assuming somebody is in there, at least one person. And I did notice that there was a lot of damage to the car. Like, had it been there a long time, something happened to it. And so when I saw that damage, that immediately made me think that this duck shoe thing was going to take care of some business, I guess. So here I am creating an exchange between these two low lifes. And, I wanted to have that squeak sound persist throughout, kind of almost be like a comedic note as the story went on between their dialogue. And I think I'm okay with that. I'm happy with how that happened. I think that those elements like that I try to pepper throughout because they help just logically break up the action. It's almost like a movie, right? With a movie with some kind of symbol or some kind of signal, sound, image, something like that interrupts people. And that's what I was trying to do. And also, I didn't quite know what I was going to do here yet. I didn't know if the image you're looking at here was the aftermath, or if it was just it was things just getting started, and that's really what it turned out to be. And here we have another squeak, and then Greg's asking, "Did you hear that?" And yes, of course, Dave did because he's the one who brought it up in the beginning. But I don't know. I pictured these two guys similar. I don't know. There's like they're out drinking. They're coming home, or I decide eventually that Greg is giving Dave a ride home and that they're friends. And Dave is a little bit reliant upon Greg for a car. He doesn't have one. We don't know why. But anyway, there's this relationship between these two where Dave clearly doesn't want to be in the car because, as you know from the story, that it's torn up, it's destroyed, it smells like cat piss. I started thinking immediately, why, like, what is the squeak sound? What are they going to address? How are they going to address it eventually when they both come to know? And I'm only at 200 words now, and I decided that I would bring a dog into it. And then there's no dog in the story, but I had to figure out, okay, well, once they both hear this, what is their response going to be? Starts off with dogs, and it goes with rats, and as I'm sure if you've ever written anything without an outline like these, you're just kind of figuring it out as you go. So you really don't. You're just looking for that next step. What's that next thing that's going to get you there? And every sentence and really every word you write, you're hoping that I know it's going to come to me. I know I'm going to figure out eventually how this thing's going to end. And already I'm at 276 words, and I have not yet revealed the rubber duck sitting in the shoe, but I have established that the car has now parked. So things are about to happen. And I like this next part. It really didn't. It just came out right when I was writing. I thought, okay, well, if these guys have been drinking, which I haven't really established that yet, but I assume they have been. Maybe one of them sees something out the window, being the duck, and the other one doesn't quite know, and that's being Dave, who's getting out of the car, his back or the side. He's not paying attention to what's outside of his window. I had this image in my mind of in movies where you see, usually it's the rear view mirror highlighting the eyes of a character, or I guess like a light coming through mini blinds or something like that. That's what I pictured Greg's eyes to look like. And what I wanted to do here is have one of them horrified and one of them just struck funny, like he thinks what's happening. And so right here you can see that Dave sees fear in Greg's eyes and he immediately thinks it's the cops. And so we go to this internal monologue here where Dave is like, oh shit, okay, here's what's going to happen if Dave gets a DUI, on and on and on. Here's how it's going to affect me. And still, we haven't looked yet. And I think this technique is done a lot in horror movies, and maybe it's a little bit cliche, but it's where, one character is aware of something that another one isn't. And I've heard this described in different ways, particularly in horror movies, when the audience is technically that other person. So the viewer of the film is the one who knows the monster is in the room, but the protagonist does not. So what I did is I just took that concept, but put it inside the story because I'm just not really a fan of omniscient writing at all. And so everything I do is from one character's POV per scene, per chapter, or even per book. And here we are. Dave is getting ready to turn out and look at this, what he thinks is going to be a police officer. And finally, he notices it, a big fucking shoe. And I didn't know how this was going to go. I knew from here on out, by this time I did know at the midpoint of the story that this duck is going to wreak havoc on these guys. And I guess it might, like I said earlier, it might still work with the title, Can I Ride With You? Maybe the duck just wants a ride. Maybe he doesn't know his own strength being in the shoe. And man, I'd really love to contact this artist just to know what he was thinking when he created this. It's just so random, and I love it. It's almost as if he created this image with the car. And I think I said this in the over the artwork when I was talking about it, but it looks like normal game artwork, with the exception of the duck in the shoe. I don't know, but it really makes this thing, it elevates it just from what would otherwise be a normal image, a good image, but a normal image. And I did notice, I'm trying to describe up above how the shoe looks like it's no one wears their shoes like that, right? That's laced like it is in a store to be purchased. It's perfect. The laces are on the inside. There's no tying under the tongue. It looks like, from what I can see, the shoe is a relatively unblemished. But now here again, I have a contrast. So we don't quite know the horror that is about to befall these two men, because we have Greg, who really knows what's going on, and Dave's laughing his ass off because there's this giant duck, this bathtub duck, this squeaky duck, just sitting in a shoe randomly. And so Dave, he's just dying of laughter, and we know very soon that the reality of the situation will come to Dave. And I like this image here too, and this is just something that popped up where I thought Dave was going to try to just snap a shot of Greg in his horrific or his horrified state. And sometimes when you turn your cell phone on, the selfie camera pops on if it's been initiated. And so I thought that would be a kind of a cool way to reveal what's really happening. And so that's what he does. He sees like past his head, and he sees the duck's head turned, and as we know, these ducks, they don't have articulated necks. They're just a mold. So that's what I thought was going through Dave's head. And I think that's it's an unexpected observation, I think, because if you saw this giant duck in a shoe looking at you, I feel like the last thing you're going to think of is, hey, it's not supposed to be able to turn its neck. But sometimes in life, I think that stuff happens, right? We don't necessarily think of what might be the obvious thing to think about in a certain situation. And so that's what kind of inspired that. And here we have the shoe, or the duck in the shoe, wreaking havoc on these two poor men. And oh yeah, and I've already established that it's smeared with gore and bone, so it's already done some killing. I thought I would use that as an indicator to the reader that exactly what's going to happen. Because I think if the duck was just going to attack, you might think like, I don't know, the guys are going to get away, or maybe this duck is just wants a ride. But the second you see that, it's really just a cue to the reader, to everybody in the story, that things are not going to go so hot. So we have the two characters just struggling in the car together. Greg finally makes it out and rolls onto his back just in time to get smashed by this rubber duck and his shoe. And at this point, I wasn't sure if I was going to kill Dave or not, but that is how things ended up. And that's okay. I like to just remove every character from the scene. I like the image, or to tell the story, or what's in the image to stay in the image with the story. So I like the story, even if sometimes the actions in the story exist outside of the picture. And this is just either like before or after, or sometimes during. I like the idea that it ends with this, right? There's no future. This was either the beginning of the end or the end of the end. And I know I'm really getting close to 1,000, so I needed to wrap it up. And I just imagined finally we think there's a bit of hope, and Dave is able to get the car into reverse, but he hits that same column that Greg hit, and here comes the duck. And because Dave had been laughing, and just because of the absurdity of this entire thing, I thought it would be funny if the last thing that Dave did was laugh. And so that's how I ended it. And I mean, this whole story is pretty much a dark comedy, and I like that about it. It is dark, but it's funny, at least to me. It's fun, and so I'm glad that I didn't make it super depressing, even though it was gory. It's very, very similar to the Laundry Done story, I think, and I feel like that's my only regret is I try my best, or at least my intention is when I start a story is to try to not make it like any of the other ones I've done, which can be difficult because there's not really much, or there's no planning at all, and so it's hard for me to think like, oh well, I've done this already. Let me go back and revise it, or let me outline it so I don't do it like I've done anything else. So cleanup here was relatively quick, which I was glad for because the skeleton was there. There wasn't a long. I mean, you can just if you checked out the last week's episode, there you can just look at the paragraph. The white space in the story is much more apparent. The paragraphs are much shorter for the most part. That's the way I prefer to write. I like the way it guides the eye down the page, and I like the cadence it creates and the pacing it creates. And I think that, and I say that just as you're looking at two back-to-back big paragraphs, but that is the idea. And I think sometimes when I have longer paragraphs, I have to like longer sentences because those move more quickly. So when I have Dave grabbed his backpack from the floor, that sentence is pretty damn long. It's kind of just a because. But that kind of writing creates a faster pace, even though it is a run-on sentence. Because every time you put a period, it makes things feel abrupt. It does make them feel like they go quickly, but it's more staccato. It's very like boom, 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 over and over and over again, and it can be a little bit exhausting. So to pick up the pace, I like to also have longer run-on sentences because I think that just when your eye's not stopping, and I really realize it when I'm reading the story back, and that really helps. So that's another thing. I mean, if you're trying to figure out the pacing of your story, read it out loud or have one of those voice assistants read it to you. I do that with every novel I write because you would not believe the stuff that just you missed from reading it in your head versus hearing it aloud. And I find it's better to have one of the robot voices do it because sometimes your eyes miss things, even if you are reading it aloud and at a slower pace. Whereas the robot will not miss the weird misspelled words or double words or anything like that. And I think I ended. It was about an hour 7, so I don't know why. That is like the time about an hour 6, hour 7, like just between 5 and 10 minutes over an hour seems to be where I am. And yeah, just hunting back through some things. And this one's funny because I feel like a lot of the ones I write most of the time are pretty clean when I get to this point. But this one there's a few issues in it, like repeated words and things like that. So I think when I go back to edit this, for publication, I'll fix a lot of those things, and which may affect some of the sentence structure a bit because that's the one challenge. I've gone back and edited a few already, and it's pretty tough to keep it at 1,000. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I am so glad you made it. And what a crazy ride it has been for me in this story. I knew right out of the gate, seeing this image, it couldn't be anything but weird. And I think that's where I went. And I feel that I put my own little dark spin on things because, as I've mentioned time and time again, and as you've read time and time again, that is just part of my storytelling vocabulary. And I hope you're okay with that. I'm okay with that. It seems like every creator has a style that they lean into, and it's really a style that I like in my fiction I read as well, or films I watch, or video games I play. Something about a little bit of darkness just makes it all the better. All right, well, let's talk about the craft of the story, or maybe something I learned in this particular one. And I mentioned it a little bit in the when I was talking about the writing process, and that was sort of there's a couple techniques in there, and one being the punctuation of the squeak throughout to interrupt these two. So what that does is it really helped me create a pace here. It also allowed me to create a cadence because it was a nice breakup. I've actually done this quite a bit in my stories, and maybe I'm too repetitive with it. I don't know, but it's just a really nice, not only visual break, but pacing break for the reader. And another thing I mentioned was the sentence variation. So short sentences create a sense of urgency and fast pacing. It's very staccato, as I mentioned. It's very abrupt. It's very jarring, I guess. And so I tried to mix it up with longer run-on sentences, which also keep the action going quickly and keep your eye moving. And also, not only from a character standpoint, but from an experience standpoint. So when your eyes are gliding down the page, I think it's important to keep that in mind, right? Because, a period signals a full stop. So just in our brains, we create that pause, even if we're not reading it aloud. Whereas a run-on sentence creates a situation where we're trying to breathe almost. And when I'm reading these stories out loud, there are a few times where I have to stop, take a breath, and then edit that back down, that gap, because it's just so hard to say it all in one breath. And when you do that, and that is why I think it's so important to read your work aloud, or even better yet, have the computer read it to you, because they're not going to connect the dots, right? Your mind and your eyes, they can really see through the mistakes because they know what you meant to say. Outside of that, from a crafts perspective, I can't really think of anything else I can add other than it was fun. I highly suggest you write something that is fun sometimes. I tend to be a little bit too serious too often with my narrative work, and I think it's that for me is something that I'm drawn to most of the time. But breaks like these are not only good for you to experiment more, they're a good excuse to do something different, get out of your comfort zone. I hope you enjoyed the story, and if you did, consider giving me a like or subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what kinds of things you're struggling with your writing. Let me know techniques you may have to get yourself out of writer's block, or maybe just keep your skills fresh and sharp. And as you know, I wrote a book. It's called The Field. It's a dark coming of age story for free on Amazon and anywhere ebooks are sold. Think of like Stand By Me. It's in that vein. So I think you'd enjoy it if you like that kind of story. And I have a book coming out very soon, which I will make a video for as soon as the editor gives it back to me. And I've been streaming here on YouTube and on Twitch simultaneously every Saturday and Sunday around 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you're a writer or a creative of any kind, and want to hang out and get some work done, or maybe just see the writing process and all of the struggles I go through, come hang out. And I've also created a Discord server. So if that's something you're interested in, check out the description below for the link. It's completely free to join. It's open to anybody. And really, it's not just open to writers, creatives of any kind. Like I know on the stream, we have some game developers, we have some screenwriters, we have some artists, things like that. I just want people of like minds to be together and support each other and inspire each other, hopefully. Thanks again for watching, and keep reading and keep writing, and I will see you next week. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.